Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom had 4 sons, though most of her sons are well known. Her daughters-in-law are not as well known. Hopefully this video will provide an insight into the eventful lives of her daughters-in-law. Alexandra of Denmark's story is one of rags to riches. She was the long-suffering wife of Edward VII and one of the most fashionable women of her time. For her, tragedy was never far away, and drama and scandal filled her days. How is it that a young woman who grew up in a dusty attic became the queen consort of one of the most powerful nations in the world? Alexandra of Denmark was born on the 1st of December 1844 in the Yellow Palace in Copenhagen, Denmark. Her parents were Christian IX of Denmark and Louise of Hesse-Kassel. She had 5 siblings: Frederick, George, Dagmar, Tura, and Valdemar. Growing up, she lived a very modest life, and her father did not have a large income. In 1848, Christian VIII of Denmark died, and his only son Frederick ascended the throne. Frederick had no children from 2 failed marriages, and a succession crisis arose. Frederick ruled in both Denmark and Schleswig-Holstein, where there were 2 forms of succession. In Denmark, both men and women could inherit, although male preference primogeniture was in place. However, in Schleswig-Holstein, only men could inherit. In 1852, it was decided that Alexandra's father would be the heir. Alexandra and her family moved into Bernstorff Palace, and although their status had risen, they received no increase in their income. By the late 1850s, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and her husband Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha were searching for a wife for their eldest son and heir, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. Their eldest daughter, Crown Princess Victoria of Prussia, was enlisted by her parents in seeking a suitable candidate. Alexandra was not their first choice, as the Danes were at conflict with the Prussians over the territory of Schleswig-Holstein. However, eventually Alexandra was chosen as the only suitable candidate for their son. In 1861, Alexandra met Albert after Crown Princess Victoria introduced the two to each other. A year later, Albert proposed to Alexandra and she accepted. Though they had only met a few times and didn't really know each other, they were wed on the 10th of March 1863 in St. George's Chapel. The English court was still in mourning for Albert's father, who had died in December 1861. So ladies were restricted to wearing grey, lilac and mauve, and only Alexandra's closest relations were invited to the wedding, which upset many of her Danish relatives, who were not invited. After her wedding, Alexandra went by the title of the Princess of Wales. By 1864, Alexandra's father was King of Denmark, her brother George was King of the Hellenes, her sister Dagmar was engaged to the Tsarevich of Russia, and Alexandra had given birth to her first child, Albert Victor, although he was more affectionately known as Eddie by the family. Alexandra and Albert would go on to have 5 more children: George, Louise, Victoria, Maud, and Alexander John. According to Queen Victoria's diaries, all of the children were born prematurely. However, it is more likely that Alexandra misled Queen Victoria on the delivery dates, so that the Queen would not be present during the births of her children. During the birth of Louise, Alexandra contracted rheumatic fever, which threatened her life. Though she recovered, she was left with a permanent limp. The German invasion of Schleswig-Holstein had a profound effect on Alexandra, who grew to greatly dislike Germany. She and her husband supported Denmark during the war, which was a point of contention for her mother-in-law, Queen Victoria, and her sister-in-law, Crown Princess Victoria. Alexandra was popular amongst the English. She appeared dignified, charming, and affectionate. She greatly enjoyed dancing, ice skating, and hunting, much to her mother-in-law's dismay. With her husband, Alexandra went on many international tours, such as tours to Ireland, Austria, Egypt, and Greece. The Prince and Princess of Wales set up residence in Sandringham House and Marlborough House. Their marriage was mostly happy, although Albert didn't give his wife as much love and affection as she would have liked. They became closer when Albert almost died from typhoid fever in 1671, and their youngest son, Alexander John, died. Alexandra and Albert wanted privacy when their youngest son died, but Queen Victoria insisted on a period of court mourning and a funeral for the infant, which the press saw as a sickening mummery. Alexandra mostly looked the other way as her husband had liaisons with other women and was perpetually unfaithful to her. Throughout her life, Alexandra suffered from several physical disabilities. She suffered from progressive deafness, otosclerosis, and a limp. When the ladies of her court and society at large saw that Alexandra had a limp, they adopted a similar limp in it as fashionable. 3 years in the late 1870s, Alexandra remained separated from her 2 sons as her sons went on a worldwide cruise as part of their naval and general education. Alexandra showed herself to be an affectionate and loving mother who wrote regularly to them. In 1881, Alexandra and Albert Edward travelled to Russia to represent Britain at the funeral of Alexander II of Russia, and to comfort Alexandra's sister Dagmar, who became the Tsarina. Alexandra undertook many public duties for the Queen and became the public face of the monarchy along with her husband. In 1892, her eldest son, Eddie, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, died after contracting influenza. Alexandra fell into a deep mourning and had his room and possessions kept exactly as he had left them, similar to how Queen Victoria had reacted after her husband Prince Albert's death in 1861. Queen Victoria passed away in 1901, and Albert Edward and Alexandra became the King and Queen of the United Kingdom. That same year, Alexandra and her husband cared for their grandchildren, while her son George and his wife Mary went on an extensive tour of the British Empire. Days before the scheduled coronation, in June 1902, Albert Edward, now Edward VII, fell ill with appendicitis. The coronation was postponed so Edward VII could recover from his surgery. Alexandra stood in for the king during a military parade and the royal ascot races to avoid public alarm. In August 1902, the coronation was held and Alexandra and Edward were crowned together. Alexandra's duties changed little, and she kept on the same servants when she became queen. In December 1903, Alexandra's woman of the bedchamber, Charlotte Knollys, saved the queen's life after her room began to fill with smoke. She roused Alexandra and brought her to safety. After Alexandra's father died, Alexandra and her sister Dagmar bought a villa in Denmark in order to retain their family links. They used it as a private getaway. Alexandra was denied access to her husband's papers and was excluded from some foreign tours and politics. In 1910, Alexandra attended a debate at the British House of Commons, becoming the first Queen Consort to visit the House of Commons. During a visit to her brother George I of Greece, her husband fell ill. Alexandra arrived back in England only the day before her husband died. On his deathbed, she nursed him and allowed his mistress Alice Keppel to visit. Albert died on the 6th of May 1910. Alexandra refused to allow his body to be moved, and only after over a week did she agree to have his body moved. She moved out of Buckingham Palace to Marlborough House and retained Sandringham House until her death. Alexandra did not attend her son's coronation in 1911, which was customary. It was normal for a crowned queen not to attend the coronation of another king or queen. She continued to work for the monarchy. In 1918, her grandnephew Tsar Nicholas II and his family were assassinated, and she had her sister Dagmar rescued from Russia in 1919. Dagmar and Alexandra spent some time together. Throughout her senior years, Alexandra remained youthful in her appearance, but eventually the years caught up to her. From 1920, she suffered from partial blindness accompanied by profound deafness. Alexandra passed away on the 20th of November 1925 from a heart attack. She lay in state at Westminster Abbey before being buried beside her husband in St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia was the only surviving daughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia and Marie of Hesse and by Rhine. She would later marry Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom's second son, Prince Alfred, becoming the only Russian princess to marry into the British royal family. Maria was born on the 17th of October 1853 in the Alexandra Palace. She was the sixth child and second daughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia. She was born during the reign of her grandfather, Nicholas I, who died in 1855. Maria's older sister, Alexandra, died before Maria was born, and Maria herself almost died from a bacterial throat infection at the age of 7. Maria grew up in luxury, in large palaces and country estates owned by her family. The family mainly lived in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. However, they also stayed in many other palaces. In the summer, they stayed at Peterhof, which contained farms, cottages, and pavilions on the Gulf of Finland. During autumn and winter time, the imperial family would live in Catherine Palace and Alexandra Palace. Located on a pond in the park of Alexandra Palace, Maria had her own little house on the children's island, which was off limits to adults and was used by the royal children as a playhouse. Maria's parents showered her with love and affection. She was considered her parents' favourite child, and she spent a lot of time with them. When she was bored of her studies, Maria would go to her father's office and often interrupt his meetings with his ministers. Maria was close to her brothers and would stand up for them when someone reprimanded them or gave out to them. Tsarina Marie had weak lungs and would often spend time in Germany and Europe during the winter time. She would take her 3 youngest children, Sergei, Paul, and Maria, with her. Because of this, Maria grew close to her brothers Sergei and Paul. Surrounded by 6 brothers, Maria grew up as a tomboy with an independent soul. She was genuine and honest and very stubborn. Maria was well educated and grew to be fluent in English, French, and German. In 1868, Maria met Prince Alfred of the United Kingdom while in Guggenheim in Germany. Prince Alfred was visiting his sister Princess Alice, who was married to Maria's first cousin, Prince Louis of Hesse and by Rhine. Alfred was a member of the British Navy, and they would not see each other again until 1871, when Alexander II and Tsarina Marie visited the Battenbergs in Guggenheim again. Maria accompanied them. Maria and Alfred felt great attraction to each other and spent their days walking and talking together. They wanted to marry, but Queen Victoria and the Tsar were against the match. Alexander II did not want to lose his beloved daughter and used his daughter's youth as an obstacle for the match. He suggested a period of 1 year before any decision would be made. Negotiations began in January 1873. Negotiations were taking place. Both Queen Victoria and Tsarina Marie looked for alternative partners for their children. But for Alfred and Maria, there was no one else they preferred nor loved. An Anglo-Russian dispute started over the Afghan border, and Queen Victoria's advisors suggested marriage between the British prince and Russian princess might ease tensions between the two countries by placing the monarchs of Britain and Russia in close proximity. In July 1873, Alfred proposed to Maria and she accepted him. Though both sets of parents were happy for their children, they were displeased at the match. Alexander granted his daughter a dowry of £100,000 and an annual allowance of £32,000. As well as this, he gave his daughter some of the best jewellery owned by the Romanovs, a trousseau worth £40,000, and a commissioned parure of diamonds and rubies as a wedding gift. For his new son-in-law, Alfred was made honorary chief of a Russian Guards regiment. The first crisis for the match occurred a week after the engagement. Queen Victoria insisted Maria come to Scotland to meet the Queen, but Alexander refused, and Marie suggested Cologne as a meeting place instead. Victoria made herself very unpopular in Russia when she refused to allow Alfred's brother, the Prince of Wales, to be made colonel of a Russian regiment, and demanded that an Anglican marriage service also be held alongside the Orthodox ceremony. The wedding took place in St. Petersburg on the 23rd of January 1874. Queen Victoria did not attend, but the Prince and Princess of Wales stood in for her. The newlyweds spent their wedding night at the Alexandra Palace. Maria became the Duchess of Edinburgh on marriage. They arrived in England in March 1874. They were welcomed at Windsor by cheering crowds. They made their public entry into London society on the 12th of March. And moved into Clarence House, which would become their London home. Maria had an Orthodox chapel installed in the home. They also had a country estate, Eastwell Park, in Kent. As a Grand Duchess and an Imperial Highness, Maria expected to take precedence over the British-born princesses and the Princess of Wales. Once she married Alfred, she was only allowed to use the style of Her Royal Highness, but the Tsar thought Maria should continue to go by Her Imperial Highness. There was also the issue of whether she should be referred to as a Grand Duchess of Russia or as the Duchess of Edinburgh. On the orders of Queen Victoria, she would be known as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Edinburgh while in Britain, which irked Maria. In retaliation, Maria liked to show off her magnificent jewellery, which made the British princesses and the Queen jealous. In the order of precedence, Maria would be behind the Princess of Wales, which annoyed Maria. As a result of Maria not getting her way, Maria and the Queen's relationship turned sour. Maria and Alfred had 6 children together. Their first child, Alfred, was born on the 15th of October 1874, 9 months after the wedding. Their second child, Marie, was born just over a year later on the 29th of October 1875. Maria nursed the children herself, refusing to hire a wet nurse, which shocked many, including the Queen. Maria and Alfred and their children moved to Malta. Alfred was stationed there for his naval service. Maria gave birth to their third child, Victoria Melita, on the 25th of November 1876. Just under 2 years later, she would give birth to a third daughter, Alexandra, born on the 1st of September 1878. Their second son was stillborn. The couple's final child, Beatrice, was born on the 20th of April 1884. Maria had wished for more children, describing childbirth as the only heavenly moment for a woman. In 1877, Russia was at war with Turkey, and Queen Victoria sent Tsar Alexander a series of aggressive letters that almost led to war between Britain and Russia. Maria was shocked at the hostility of her mother-in-law towards her homeland and towards her father. Life in Britain was difficult for Maria. She was appalled by the air, the food, and the atmosphere. She found Windsor and Osborne boring and was disappointed by her new home. In her eyes, Britain would never compare or compete with the splendour of Russia. She also disliked her British in-laws, finding the Queen's company oppressive. She only cared for Prince Leopold and Princess Beatrice, the siblings-in-law closest in age to her. She became homesick for Russia and was happy to return whenever she could. Her masculine manners and imperious attitude made her unpopular in Britain, but Maria made it clear that she did not care about what other people thought. In February 1880, Maria was in Russia for her father's 25th anniversary, when radicals attempted to assassinate the Tsar and the entire imperial family. A bomb demolished the dining room and guard room. The Tsar was unharmed. Maria's mother died in June 1880, and her father was assassinated in 1881. Maria and Alfred were present at the coronation of Maria's brother Alexander III in May 1883. The following year, they also attended the wedding of Maria's younger brother Sergei to Alfred's niece Princess Elizabeth of Hesse and Bahrain in Russia. Alfred was heir to the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha because his uncle Ernest II had no children. Expecting to be the Duchess there, Maria had a palace built in Coburg for the family, known as Edinburgh Palace. The family settled in Malta for a time in 1886, when Alfred was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the British Mediterranean Fleet. Though life there was unexciting for Maria, she welcomed the new environment and became a fantastic hostess to the naval officers and their wives. Due to her husband's career, Maria was able to travel extensively and visited most European countries. In 1887, the Duke relinquished his command of the Mediterranean fleet and the family moved to Coburg. Her husband, occupied with his career in the Navy, was away most of the time, and responsibility of their children's upbringing fell on Maria's shoulders. She was a strict mother, but devoted to her children and wanted the best for them. Aside from common interests in music and their children, Maria and Alfred had very little in common and grew apart. In the mid-1880s, he became an alcoholic and was becoming increasingly unfaithful to her. Despite the resentment that grew in Maria towards her husband, she kept the marriage going, hiding her troubles from her children. Arguments over their children added to their marriage problems. Alfred hoped his daughter Marie would marry Prince George of Wales, the future George V, but Maria was determined that her children would avoid her mistake of marrying into the British royal family and put a stop to any talks of marriage. Ernest II died in 1893, and Alfred became the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, with Maria as his Duchess. Maria enjoyed her new role and found the country to be charming, with many opportunities. Maria took to updating the badly furnished castles and charitable works. Maria believed in marrying her daughters off before they could think for themselves. Marie, their eldest daughter, married Ferdinand, Crown Prince of Romania, in 1893. He would later become the King of Romania. Victoria Melita married Ernest Louis, the Grand Duke of Hesse and Bahrain, in 1894. Alexandra was married to Prince Ernest of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, the future Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Their youngest daughter, Beatrice, married Alfonso of Spain, the third Duke of Galliera, in 1909. In November 1894, Maria's oldest brother, Alexander III, died, and his eldest son, Nicholas, succeeded as the new Tsar. He married Alfred's niece, Princess Alex of Hesse and Bahrain. Alfred and Maria stayed in Russia for the funeral of Alexander III and then the wedding of Nicholas II. Maria and her husband, in name only, celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in January 1899. Their only son, Alfred, was gravely ill by this point. He had contracted syphilis from his womanizing. On the night of their wedding anniversary, young Alfred shot himself, but survived the initial shot. He would later die from his wounds on the 6th of February 1899. The Duke and Duchess were heartbroken at their son's death, and his death was the final blow to their marriage. Alfred blamed Maria for his son's death, as she had been responsible for his upbringing. The heir of the duchy fell to Alfred's nephew, Charles Edward, who was only a teenager and living in Britain. He moved to Germany to be educated there. Alfred was dying by this point from throat cancer, and he passed away on the 30th of July 1900 in his sleep. After his death, Maria stayed in England before returning to Germany. During her daughter's personal crises, she supported them. Relations with the new Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha were tense after Maria had worked so hard for the duchy and cleared its debts. However, relations improved when the Duke supported the marriage between Beatrice and Alfonso. After the outbreak of war in 1914, Maria was stuck in Germany and sided with Germany against Russia. She retired to Switzerland after Russophobia reached an all-time high in Coburg. During the Russian Revolution, many of Maria's Russian relatives were killed, including her brother Paul and nephew Tsar Nicholas II. Her large fortune, which was held in a trust in Russia, was lost, and she never saw a single penny of her British income. As a result, she had to sell much of her impressive jewellery collection. The war broke Maria. The Russia and Germany she knew and loved were gone. She died suddenly on the 25th of October 1920. She was buried in the ducal mausoleum in Coburg beside her husband and son. Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia was the wife of Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, the third son of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. She was Vice-Regal Consort of Canada from 1911 to 1916, when her husband served as Governor-General. Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia was born on the 25th of July 1860 at the Marble Palace in Prussia. She was the fourth child of Prince Frederick Karl of Prussia and Princess Maria Anna of Anhalt-Dessau. Her grandfather, Prince Karl of Prussia, was a brother of Wilhelm I, German Emperor, making Louise Margaret a second cousin of Wilhelm II, the last German Emperor. Through her mother's side of the family, she was also a descendant of Prussian kings, as her great-grandfather was King Frederick William II of Prussia. Louise Margaret had three sisters, Marie, Elizabeth, and Anna, and one brother, Frederick Leopold. Louise Margaret grew up in an unhappy household. Her father was abusive to her mother. Apparently, he beat her up after she gave birth to Louise Margaret for not giving birth to a son. Only on the urgings of Frederick Karl's uncle, King Wilhelm I of Prussia, did her parents not separate. Officially, they remained married, but they lived separate lives after her mother gave birth to their only son. Louise Margaret met Prince Arthur of the United Kingdom in 1878. Arthur was visiting his sister, the German Crown Princess, and Louise Margaret was present. Arthur found her attractive and took an instant liking to her. Queen Victoria was displeased with the princess, finding her plain and her parents unpleasant. Upon returning to Britain, Arthur spoke to his mother about how much he liked her. After Victoria met Louise Margaret, she became convinced marriage between her son and Louise Margaret would be the right decision. Arthur and Louise Margaret married on the 13th of March 1879. She became known as the Duchess of Connaught and Strathearn upon marriage, and Louise Margaret was given a diamond tiara and a pearl and diamond pendant from her new mother-in-law. Arthur and Louise Margaret went on to have 3 children together: Margaret, Arthur, and Patricia. Through their daughter Margaret, they are ancestors of King Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden, Queen Anne-Marie of Greece, and Queen Margaretha II of Denmark. During the first 20 years of marriage, Louise Margaret accompanied her husband on his various military assignments. In 1911, Arthur was appointed Governor-General of Canada, and Louise Margaret and their daughter Patricia accompanied Arthur to Canada. They remained in Canada throughout the First World War until 1916. Louise Margaret worked for the Red Cross along with her daughter. In 1916, Louise Margaret and her family returned to Britain, and they moved into Clarence House. Only 6 months later, on the 14th of March 1917, Louise Margaret died from bronchial pneumonia at the age of 56. Her husband would survive her by nearly 25 years, dying in 1942. Princess Helena of Waldeck-Pyrmont was the wife of Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, the youngest son of Queen Victoria. Princess Helena was born on the 17th of February 1861 in Arleston Castle in the Principality of Waldeck-Pyrmont. Her parents were George Victor, Prince of Waldeck-Pyrmont, and Princess Helena of Nassau. Through both of her parents, Helena was a descendant of King George II of Great Britain through his eldest daughter, Anne, Princess Royal. Helena had 6 siblings: Sophie, Pauline, Marie, Emma, Friedrich, and Elizabeth. Her brother was the last reigning Prince of Waldeck-Pyrmont. Her sister Marie married William II of Württemberg, and her sister Emma married William III of the Netherlands. She also had one half-brother from her father's second marriage to Princess Louise of Schleswig-Holstein, Prince Wulrad. Helena's family lived at Arleston Castle, and she received a liberal-minded education. In 1881, Helena met Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, in Darmstadt in the Grand Duchy of Hesse and by Rhine. He was the youngest son of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Leopold had been rejected by several potential royal brides due to him suffering from haemophilia and epilepsy. Queen Victoria and her daughter Victoria, German Crown Princess, stepped in and arranged a meeting between Leopold and Helena. The couple liked each other immediately, sharing a love for mathematics and philosophy. After Helena and her family were briefed on Leopold's health, they became engaged. On the 27th of April 1882, Leopold and Helena married at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. After their honeymoon, they moved into Claremont House. Less than 1 year after their wedding, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Alice. It didn't take long for Helena to become pregnant again. To escape the bad weather that hurt his joints, Leopold went to Cannes in France in March 1884. Helena, who was pregnant at the time, did not join him there. While in Cannes, Leopold slipped and banged his head. He died from the internal bleeding. Though their marriage was short, it was a loving and happy one. Leopold never took any mistresses and was completely faithful to Helena. Their only son, Charles Edward, was born on the 19th of July, 1884, 4 months after his father's death. It is through their son that they are ancestors of King Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden. Helena devoted the rest of her life to her children and charitable work. She had a strong sense of duty and loved welfare work. Queen Victoria worried for her daughter-in-law and was worried she would retreat into herself. She was pleased when Helena took up charity work. She was involved in several hospital charities and worked with those dedicated to ending human trafficking. During the First World War, she organised charity work alongside her sister-in-law, Princess Beatrice. Helena and her children continued to live in Claremont House after Leopold's death. In 1899, Charles Edward became the hereditary Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and succeeded as the Duke the following year. He left for Germany in 1899, and in 1914, at the outbreak of the First World War, Charles Edward fought on the German side. He was stripped of his British titles in 1917. Helena's daughter Alice, by contrast, remained in England and married Prince Alexander of Teck, the brother of Queen Mary. On the 1st of September 1922, Helena died of a heart attack.